Bloody Disgusting and Shudder have released yet another entry in the found footage horror genre with the continuation of their VHS series. This time, it's VHS 85. So, will these stories haunt your dreams, or are they as outdated as a VCR? An ominous mixtape blends never-before-seen snuff footage with nightmarish newscasts and disturbing home video to create a surreal analog mashup of the forgotten 80s. So, just like with the other VHS films, this is another anthology that tells 5 different unique stories and weaves them together as if we're watching one long videotape that somehow contains all the tales. Now, as per usual, we also get an interweaving narrative that plays out in small snippets between the other stories. This one is very mysterious for much of it, with vague discussions from scientists who are observing an individual and then charting its changes. Now, most of the story is just drawn out with some slight intrigue thrown in. But for the climax, this one does pack a punch. But it's not all that scary or creepy, but it's satisfyingly violent. Now, the remaining 4 stories all feature a level of extreme violence that encompasses a ton of excellent practical effects. The gore and the brutality the characters encounter or just create are convincingly grotesque, and they provide a nice payoff for the horror show. Now, something that has always been a staple of the VHS movies is the glitchiness of the footage that we watch. And while some of it just appears like it has minor tracking problems, others become very grainy and striated with tape corruption. Now, I appreciate the commitment to the authenticity, but sometimes the glitch just became too much for me. When visuals are extremely hard to decipher and see, it works against the narrative rather than building aesthetic support through some visual effects. Now, probably the worst offender of this in this anthology is the story Technogod. Between the tracking and then the lo-fi computer graphics, it became hard to see all that was going on. Now, I liked how it added authenticity to the story, especially with these Tron-like graphics, but I'd still prefer to have less of a final product be obscured by that static. Now, the story that opens the movie up, it's brutal to say the least, but it has a unique function in that only half the story is told up front, and then towards the end of the overall movie, we get the conclusion. Now, because of what's at play within the tale, breaking it up, it didn't bother me at all. It provides an intensely nail-biting setup, and then pays off with something I wasn't expecting at all. And again, the practical effects in these segments, they are outstanding, full of horrendously grisly imagery that might make you scratch your head in how they accomplish some of it. For an international entry in this, providing a story that takes place outside of the US, we get a story from Mexico that's directed by Gigi Salguero, and who she most recently was also part of the anthology horror Satanic Hispanics. Now, what I really liked about this episode is that it uses a real event to set the stage. So in 1985, there was an earthquake in Mexico City, and that's where this story begins, taking us on this harrowing journey as a news cameraman and then several rescue workers rush to get out of a crumbling building. Now, this was shot on a real VHS camera just to add to the authenticity, and it incorporates Mexican lore to provide the horror. Now, so much of it is shaky cam, so it's difficult to make out some of the sequences, but we do get enough clear and steady shots that help to establish locations, and then most importantly, the horrors that the characters encounter. What starts off as suspenseful and scary due to just the natural disaster results in something wildly gruesome with a very violent and visceral payoff. And finally, my favorite of the bunch is a story called Dreamkill that was written and directed by Scott Derrickson, who's written and directed horrors like The Black Phone, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and Sinister. Now, this is a freaky police story where we learn of crimes being recorded on videotape days or even weeks before they actually occur. And this takes a really dark turn, which I'm glad it did. I mean, it doesn't play it safe, and really it goes down the rabbit hole of twisted and disturbing. Now, the 2 main characters in this are played by Freddy Rodriguez and James Ranson, both who just create low-key, jaded people. One's a detective, the other a crime scene videographer. The story, it's a unique one, with elements that I don't think I've ever seen before. And the newness of both the concept and the delivery, they're very entertaining. And then it's made all the more enjoyable because of the unhinged chaos that's introduced. Now, this is an hour and 50 minutes long, but the time mostly flew by. I mean, I think your experience is also going to be determined by how engaged you are with each of the segments. While they mostly all follow the same formula of starting out rather tame and then get nuts, the twists are all different and they're executed with different styles, techniques, and gore. Now, I don't think this is the strongest entry within the VHS franchise, but I still had a lot of fun with it. The practical effects are just outstandingly nasty, combined with the unbridled brutality of mankind to just give us a glimpse of what could be given the right, or maybe wrong, circumstances. The tracking and glitching effects can be overdone at times, creating visuals that work against the stories, but all in all, each entry delivers a satisfying level of carnage and savagery. There's no sex, some nudity, a ton of profanity, and then, of course, a monstrous amount of violence. I give VHS 85 3.5 out of 5 couches. So are you a fan of the anthologies? Do you have a favorite segment, maybe from one or more of them? Now, for me, there are 2 that are just huge standouts. The Ratma episode from VHS 94, and then To Hell and Back from VHS 99. Let me know yours, though, in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.